Hello everybody, welcome to the webinar on TechX. I wish you good morning, if you're in the USA or Latin America. I'm in the UK, so it's my evening here. Anyway, welcome. Just to introduce myself, my name's Ian Hodgkinson. I'm an application engineer at Biamp and I'm based in the United Kingdom. Today we're going to be covering many of the aspects of the TechX wall panel system for Tesira. So we'll be covering the hardware and the features of the panels, a little bit about installation of the panels, and then moving on to the programming, which is where we've changed quite a lot recently. So firstly, a little overview of the features. I beg your pardon, the functionality of the product. So the TechX 1000 is a wall panel with a 74mm capacitive touch display. And you can have up to 6 programmable buttons, which can be latching or momentary on these panels. So we'll show you exactly how you program those in a moment. There's also a rotary encoder with a push button, so that's perfect for volume controls and mute functions in a system, for example. Then we have the TechX 2000, exactly the same footprint, but with a 96mm display, similar design, capacitive touch LCD, with a backlight. And on this one, you can have up to 12 programmable buttons, again, latching or momentary, with complete control of the colors used and the text or icons that are on each of the buttons. The common features, they are both available in white or black. The brightness of the backlight is controlled by ambient light, or can be controlled by ambient light if you wish it to. There's also an LED light bar indicator at the top of the display, so when you're using it with mounted on a wall, it's very useful to indicate a mute status, for example, of the zone. New for the TechX is that we now have multiple pages, so we can do page flips, which I'll show you when we get to the programming. But similar to the first time TechX was launched, it is Ethernet based and PoE powered, so IP controlled in these devices. So a little bit about the LED light bar. So here you can see there's an LED array at the top of the panel. So when it's mounted against the wall, it's very useful to show the status, and that can be red, amber, or green, and programmed for control by any button, for example, or any mode. So the installation of the panel we've made that very simple for you. So it's a wall-mounted panel predominantly, and we've made the back box such that it can be fitted to all international back boxes we found around the world. So you take the back box away from the panel, mount take the back plate away from the panel, mount it against the wall panel or the wall box itself, and then make the connection and connect the front panel, wall panel directly to the panel again, or to the back plate. The in-wall block is very small, only 4 centimeters square by 1.1 centimeters deep, so it's very easy to accommodate that inside a back box. The wall panels themselves, both are the same size, so they're 9 centimeters wide and 13 centimeters high, and their depth is only 1.2 centimeters, so they're very slimline against the wall once you've installed them into the back box. We also have a table mount called the TechX TM. So this is a very nice, elegant way of presenting a wall panel on a table environment. And that is comes included with a 1.8 meter CAT cable so that you can directly connect it into your network infrastructure. And again, available in white or black colors. So we support multiple ways of connecting TechX into your Tesira system. So the simplest is a single cable from the TechX to a PoE injector to provide power. And then you can take the other side of the PoE injector off to the control port of a Tesira unit. So I've showed a Forte device here. You can, of course, use a Forte-X, which has PoE included in it, or you can use a standard network switch. Obviously, if you've got a larger control network in your system, then that can be accommodated. We also support star topology, so I've used a TC5 here, for example, and in this case, one port is going off to each of the ports on the 3 TechX that we've got in this system. Then we lastly support daisy chain, so up to 4 TechXs can be connected from one PoE port on one Ethernet port, such that they are daisy chained. So this can be convenient in some applications, but obviously the distance between the multiple panels can be restricting in this case. So moving on to the programming of TechX. Now this is where we've made significant changes from when the product was initially launched. So now there is no need for a JSON file. So we don't use the same methodology as before, where we have a separate JSON file which is programmed and uploaded into the TechX separately. You can, however, import these files if you've got them on your computer, for example, and you need to import them. I'm very happy to say that TechX is now fully part of a Tesira file and system, so it becomes very much like any other device in a Tesira system. So you'll see as we go forward how this integrates very nicely into Tesira now. So there is now a block in the Tesira software, and I can show you how this works. So if you go to the object bar and choose the control section, you will find the TechX in there. So if you select that, click on your desktop, you are then given the option to choose between a TechX 1000 and a TechX 2000. Then once you've okayed through that, you get the block itself. Obviously, in this case, it's just a representation. It's not part of a system because you can see that it's got the question mark, so it doesn't have it's a pre-compiled system in this case. If you double click on the TechX block, however, you get the programming screen where you can program all functions inside that TechX. And we're going to dig deep into this a little bit later. So just a quick run through of the interface of the programming for TechX. Firstly, and very importantly, you have the device ID box. So this is where you give this programming or this wall panel in your Tesira design an individual device ID. So I normally give a name here which relates to the position or the location of the wall panel, for example, Office 1 or reception or auditorium, something like that, just so that you give it an indication of where the device is located. And this is how you associate this programming that you're doing with a physical piece of hardware, and I'll show you that in a moment. You can then choose the color, and that's obviously just for the representation inside the software. You also have some pages or page controls here, and I'll show you about the page flips and the multiple page support in a little bit. Then we have some page settings, which is where you can choose the button layouts, the title text, which appears on the main screen, and indeed the color scheme for the whole page. Talking about button layouts, the TechX 1000 supports 8 different layouts, from 2 buttons up to 6 buttons, but multiple ways of choosing which one you want there. The TechX 2000 has 12 different versions or 12 different layouts from 3 buttons up to 12 buttons. You can also hide buttons if you're not using them, for example, to give your designer a bit of a better look if you wish. So then moving on to programming the buttons and how you do that. So once you've selected a button, in this case, you can see I've selected a PMR, a button marked PMR. What I can do is program how that button looks and functions completely. So on the right-hand side of the selected button, I can see the control section, and this applies to the selected button only. I can choose what happens when you release the button, when you push and hold the button, or when you simply just press and release the button, for example. Here I can change the button mode between a normal momentary action or a latched function. When I'm in the latched function, I can choose the color scheme separately for both states, or I can make it so that it's exactly the same for both states. Then I have the button properties itself, so for the individual state or multiple states. So that's the color, the icon, the text, and all aspects of how that button looks, for example. Then I have the programming for the light bar. So when this button is pressed, I can also choose to have the light bar come on in a particular color, or I can choose or I can choose a page flip, so that when I press this button, rather than doing a control function, what it does is simply flips to a different page inside the TechX programming. I can also adjust the title text, and this is the important part, which is where I can assign a command to or a function to the button itself using the instance tag or a raw string, for example. And I'll show you in a moment how we do that. So here is a sample. So here, for example, I want to program this button to control a source selector. So I simply use the drop down, and it uses the blocks which are inside the design that you're working on currently. So I'm selecting source selector here, source selector 1. I'm going to choose the function, so I could choose any of these functions. And in this case, I've chosen the source select, and then I can choose the channel of the source select that I want to change. For the rotary controls, if I select the rotary controls on a TechX 1000, I can change the functionality of the button hold, the button press, and indeed the counterclockwise and clockwise rotation. If I am controlling or choosing the clockwise function, I can choose the level control that I want to control. So level 1 in this case, I can choose increment, I can choose the channel number, and I can choose the step change, or the change per step in a % in this case. So I normally set this to 4 or 5, for example. So onto the programming, the older TechX files, when you connect to the Tesira software to a design in an older, in a Tesira device which was programmed using the previous version with the JSON files, you'll be prompted to ask if you want to import them. So you can choose to import them or just start from scratch with the programming. Also, you can import manually the JSON files. So if you click on a TechX block, right click on the TechX block and choose import JSON configuration, you can then import a single JSON file or multiple files. So what we're going to do now is take a look at the programming inside Tesira itself. So I've got the Tesira software running here. Hopefully you can see this. And I've also got a camera set up so that you can see the 2 wall panels that are on my desk here. So I've just brought them back from their slumbers so that you can see what's going on. So the first thing I'm going to do is take you to device maintenance in here, in the Tesira software, remote devices. So here you can see I have 3 TechX panels connected, so you can immediately see the models that I have connected. So I have 1 1000 and 2 2000s. The IP addresses in this case were set with DHCP. So if I go into the 1000 and choose network settings, you can see it's DHCP. I can, of course, change that to static IP as required. I can also change the device description. So as I said, I like to keep this as a indication of the physical position. So in this setup, it's the panel on the right of your display. So you can obviously see that. And you can also see on the panel itself, it's indicating device ID is right. And you've also got an indication of the IP address, firmware revision, and the serial number of the device. The other functionality you've got in here is the TechX 1000 properties. So the important part here is the device ID. So this is how the software relates to the piece of hardware. So here I'm giving the hardware the device ID of right. So that will then match up with any software representations of a wall panel of the same type, so that the programming will be then uploaded to that panel. You also have functions here for the display, for example, how quickly the lock function on the panel works, or how quickly it will work. So I have that off in this case. And then you also have timeouts for when the display dims or sleeps, the light bar brightness, and then the normal LCD and the dim brightness. And here you can also enable the auto brightness for the LCD. Also note, you can have multiple panels programmed to do exactly the same thing. So for example, if I open this TechX properties, you can see that it is programmed to follow the software programming, which is labeled device ID left or program ID left. And I have this one, which is also exactly the same. So that means when I make this programming and I call the programming left as a device ID or as a program ID, it will upload to both panels at the same time. So that could be very useful if you have, for example, an auditorium where you want two panels which are always doing exactly the same thing, and they will mirror each other in all operations. The other function to show you in the software here is that the TechX now supports the locate function. So here, for example, I can press the locate button. So hopefully on the screen you can see that it's showing you the locate functions on here. So that can be very useful when you want to identify a panel inside an installation already. Okay, so that's an introduction into the software and how the things are laid out. So let's get on and program a simple wall panel. So in this design, it's a very simple Tesira design with just 3 sources. So a standard input, a USB input, and a tone generator, just the 3 audio sources. They're going into 3 source selectors, a 3-way level control, and then 1 output I've got going off to some loudspeakers in my office. Then what I've got is metering on the inputs and outputs so you can see what's happening when I'm connected, and then an indication of these level controls and mutes. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to the object bar, take a TechX and put it into my design. I'm going to choose a TechX 1000 here. So you can see I have that representation in the software screen. First thing I'm going to do is change the device ID so that I want it to be loaded into my TechX wall panel, which has a device ID of right. Okay, so the one on the right of my display here. Then what I'm going to do is change the title text because I want this to be zone 1 displayed on the screen here. So hopefully you can see that on the display. Then what I'm going to do is decide on the layout of the buttons I want. Now in my case, I just want 3 buttons because I want to choose one of 3 sources in a source selector here. So this source selector I have here, I want to control from my wall panel. So the first thing I'm going to do is select button 1. I can choose to change the color and the text and so on, but what I'm going to do is keep it simple and just take the text. I'm controlling a PMR 4000 internet radio player here, or using that as a source, so I'm going to choose just PMR as the source or as the name on the button. Then what I'm going to do is program the functionality of the button. So I'm going to choose what happens when I press the button itself. So in my case, it is source selector 1, and I want to choose the source select to be input number 1. So that's my first button programmed. The second one, I'm going to choose instance tag source selector 1, source select channel 2. That's all good. And I forgot to do the text, so I'm just going to go back and call that laptop, for example, because it's coming from the USB of my laptop. Then the third button, it's simply a tone generator that I'm using here, so I'm just going to mark it as tone, and then program the button so that it's using instance tag source selector 1 and the source select channel 3. So just as a recap, the PMR button labeled, and when I press the button, it's going to choose source select 1, change it to input 1. The laptop, I've got it selected with the text. When I press it, it's going to choose source 2 on source selector 1. And then the third button is labeled tone, and I'm going to choose input 3 of a source selector, source select 1. So that's all good. I'm finished with the programming. So now I'm going to upload it into my Tesira. So as you can see, I'm uploading the design into the Tesira and at the same time uploading the TechX programming. So just take a moment to upload. So hopefully you can now see that the TechX has been reprogrammed. You can see the 3 buttons on here. And if you look on the Tesira software here, when I press the buttons on here, you see the source selector is changing. You can't hear it, I believe, but the audio is also changing in my office here. Now, this is functional, it works, but it's not that interesting because if I look at the wall panel, I can't at any time tell which source is actually is selected currently. So we can improve on that very quickly and very easily. So the way I do that is I disconnect from the system, open the TechX panel again, and what I'm going to do is select the PMR button here, and I'm going to change it from being normal momentary function to latching function. And I'm going to change the all states button. So currently, both states of the button are going to look exactly the same. I want to change that so that the on state is going to be red to indicate to me that it's on. Then I need to do the programming again. So again, the latch function is going to be source selector 1, source select 1. Now, in this case, the unlatch function, I need to program this to be instance tag, source select 1, but then the source select channel 0. And the reason for that is so that I can double press on the button, firstly, to turn off the source, but then also when a different source is selected, it will turn off this button so that it's not displayed as on. Hopefully this will become clear as we go forward. So then I'm going to choose the laptop button. Again, choose latching, disable all states, choose the on state button, go to the latch, choose source selector 1, source select channel 2, because that's where my laptop is connected. And then here for the unlatch function, source select 0. And then lastly, the tone control, I'm going to change it to latching, disable all states, choose the on state to red, control the on state here, source selector 1, source select channel 3, and then the unlatch, source selector 1, source select 0. So just to recap, the PMR button is now a latching button with two states, blue and red. The latching state is source selector channel 1. The unlatch is source select 1, channel 0. The second button, two states for latching, source select channel 2, source select channel 0. And the third one, two states again with a different color for the latch, and source select channel 3 and 0. So that's all good. So what I will do now is upload that into the Tesira and to the TechX. So hopefully you're getting a feeling of how much easier this is to program a TechX for a system now. So that's uploaded, that's all successful. So now you can see on the wall panel itself, I've got a good indication now of the source that I've got selected. If I change the source here, not only can you see it changing on the wall panel and giving you a good indication of what's happening, but also in the Tesira software. If I change it in Tesira software, it all stays in sync very nicely. So a very vast improvement, I think you'll agree, on how it was previously. The one thing I didn't program in this TechX 1000 yet is the volume control and the mute. So let me just go ahead and show you how to do that. So here I'll open the TechX, disconnect from system, open the TechX, choose the rotary encoder, and I'm going to choose instance tag level 1 because that's this level control here that I'm using as the output. And I'm going to increment channel 1. I'm going to choose 4%. Then I'm going to program the counterclockwise, level decrement, channel 1, 4%. Then I'm going to program what happens with the push button. So when I press it, it's going to toggle channel 1 of the mute of that control. So now if I send that programming into the Tesira with the TechX, okay, so that's now successful. You can see now, again, the source selection is working wonderfully, but also you can see the level control in the Tesira software is moving up and down when I program it, when I move it, and also the mute is toggling on and off with a good indication. You could, of course, have an indication on the wall panel as well for mute if required. Okay, so hopefully that's all understandable so far. One thing I'm going to show you now is a simple way of programming a TechX 2000 so that the programming is very similar to this 1000. So I've disconnected from the system. I'm going to Control D to duplicate the panel. Then I'm going to edit block parameters for that panel and change it into a 2000. So now if I open this, you can see it's taken all of the controls from the 1000, but put them onto a 2000 panel here. And what I'm going to do is change this device ID to left so that it will send this programming into the wall panel, which is on the left of your display. So everything else I can leave as it is, and I'll send that into Tesira, and it will upload into the 2 TechXs this time. And the reason I'm doing this is so that you can see how wonderful the synchronization between the different panels is. So I'll start the audio. So here you can see we have 2 wall panels. If I change the source on one, it changes on the other, stays in sync, and everything is wonderfully in sync here. And similarly, if I change it in the software, it stays in sync. So hopefully you can appreciate how useful that can be for you. So that's good. That's some simple controls for the TechX. What I'm going to do is disconnect, delete that work that I've just done, and I'm going to bring in a TechX 1000 that I programmed earlier and a TechX 2000. So I did this just to save a little time. If I open the TechX 1000 programming, first thing I'm going to do is change the device ID to right, and then give you an explanation of what I've done here. So the first page is called main page. So this one merely has 3 zone select buttons. So the first one, if I choose it, you can see when I choose the programming, it commands a page flip to a page called zone 1. So that is then going to change the display to this one. And then here I've got a source select control of music, Bluetooth, USB, and no source. But I've also added a mute function here so that you can see when you can obviously press the mute here, but you can also see when you are muted in the zone. Then I've got a back button, as it were, here, and that simply does a page flip back to the main page. So we have the same programming for zone 2 and 3, just flipping off to page zones 2 and zone 3. Then what I've done is introduced a different element of programming for the TechX with Tesira, is one of lighting. So when I do this, show you the programming for this button, it just does a page flip to a page called lighting. And this one, what it's doing, if I just show you the programming briefly, what it's doing is actually controlling a source selector here, which is not used for audio in any way. All it's doing is I'm using the logic outputs to send command strings off to my lighting controller in my home automation system. So I'll show you this when we get it uploaded. So that's the TechX 1000 with 3 zones. So if I now upload this into Tesira, you'll see the right panel will change once the programming is updated. There you go, it's just changing. So now you can see on the TechX on the right, the TechX 1000, first of all, I have the ability to choose a particular zone, so I can change the source. So in the Tesira software here, you can see the source selector for zone 1, 2, and 3. So I can change the source selection. I can also mute in here and of course control the volume. So I have full controls of the functions inside zone 1. If I go back to the main page, I now have full controls of zone 2 for source selection, volume, and of course mute. And then similarly, zone 3, source selection and volume and mute. So hopefully you can see that with a very simple wall panel, you could make a very complex design, in this case just controlling 3 zones, but obviously more is possible. Then lastly, we've got the lighting control here. So for example, if I go into here, now what it's going to do is turn the lighting on in my office. So I'm not sure if that's coming across. Yes, I think you can see the reflection in the panel that it's just turned the top light on in my office. I also have a separate light, a lamp, and also my desk light here as well. So just opening up different possibilities for you here. And then lastly, what I've got is some advanced programming for a TechX 2000. So this one is very simple. It's only dealing with 1 zone, but it's controlling the PMR internet radio station selection and also the lighting. So if I change this to be the device ID left, upload that into Tesira, Oops, excuse me, I don't think I pressed the update correctly, but we'll see what happens. No, I didn't. Make sure it's still correct. No, it's not. So left. That was finger trouble because I didn't click the update partition. Now we should see the TechX 2000 on the left also receive new programming. There it is. So the TechX 2000 on the left is dedicated to zone 1. But what I've got in zone 1 is firstly, obviously with the TechX 2000, there's no rotary, but I've got a volume control here. So I can change the volume of zone 1, the mute status of zone 1, and that's volume down. Then I can adjust the source of zone 1. And then I've got the lighting controls, which I have similar to the 2000. But then I've also got presets here. So I can change, this is sending an internet command directly out to the PMR 4000, sorry, an Ethernet command, a control string to the PMR to change the radio station. So you can't hear this, I believe, but this is changing the radio station each time I press that button. And then, of course, I can go back to the beginning, and this is kind of my home screen. So you could see here, we could have a combination of maybe a wall panel in the manager's office where he can control the source and volume for each of the 3 zones. But then in the zone itself, obviously, it's only relevant to control the source and volume in that zone. So any combination of these is quite useful. I would like to thank you for attending the training or the webinar today. Clearly, if you have any more questions, then please email into support@biamp.com or feel free to reach out to me directly. And I'd like to wish you a good rest of the day. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.